Hi, everyone. I'm Ara Topouzian. Thank you. Thank you very much. As you've probably guessed, I'm Armenian. And by day, I run a Chamber of Commerce in city of Troy. And by night and weekends, I'm a musician. And I play this instrument called the kanun, and that is not a high school picture of me. That is a recent picture of me. But I play the kanun, which I'm going to talk to you a little bit about shortly. But I play Armenian and Middle Eastern traditional music, folk music, and I have been playing for a number of years. A little bit about what an Armenian is, an Armenian American. So my last name, Topouzian, you could tell by the last name, and I get this all the time. People go, oh, I know, you're Armenian because your last name ends with I-A-N. Wonderful. You get a cookie. But that's actually very important, and I could tell you the origin of my last name. Topuz is actually a Turkish word, but it means the instrument, the weapon, the rod with the metal with the spikes on the end that you would see sort of the gladiators. Can you picture me doing something like that, whipping that thing around? But that could stem from that somewhere back in my ancestry. That could have been one of the athletes that did such a thing, or certainly could have been the maker of that weapon. Second generation Armenian American. I grew up in Detroit, and you know, it's very interesting because being Armenian wasn't forced on me. And you probably hear different ethnicities talk about, oh, it was very difficult. I was forced to do this, I was forced to do that. I wasn't really forced to do that. I went to the public schools. I turned out, I think, okay. But I liked being an Armenian. Now that's an old picture. And I was a class clown, as you could probably guesstimate. But I loved my grandparents and the food that they made and the language that they spoke. And I went to Armenian school, and I learned how to speak Armenian a little bit. I learned how to dance Armenian, and really it's where I met a lot of my friends. Detroit. Detroit is a mecca of ethnicities, one of them being Armenians. And there are over between 30 and 40,000 Armenians that live here in this country. And a little interesting fact about, 30 to 40,000 here in Detroit, Michigan. Interesting fact is that Armenians were the first to adopt Christianity, going all the way back to 301 AD. So we're a lot more than just the Kardashians, okay? And this is a very important year for us. And there's been so much attention surrounding the Armenians and the Armenian issues because 100 years ago, the Armenian genocide took place. So 100 years ago, on April 24th, 1915, 1.5 million Armenians were massacred. Why were they massacred? They were massacred like I think other ethnicities have suffered through these types of holocausts and so forth. And the Armenians were very prevalent in what is now the Republic of Turkey, that I like to call historic Armenia. And we were entrepreneurs, we were bakers, we made carpets, we did all of this stuff. And certainly the Ottoman Empire, toward the end of the Ottoman Empire, the Young Turks, that they were called at the time, decided it's time to abolish the Armenians. So they gathered the intellectual men, they gathered, believe it or not, the musicians, the scholars, all the men. They disarmed them, they took care of them first, and then they went on to the men and women or the women and children. And just to give you an idea, this was the first genocide of the 20th century. The word genocide wasn't even invented yet, but we still call it the Armenian genocide today. And even Adolf Hitler remembered it, because before he invaded Poland, he indicated, well, after all, who's going to remember the Armenians anyway? And that's a quote that is very famous. Unfortunately, this is a genocide that is not recognized in this country or in Turkey today. I do hope that one day it will happen, but as of right now it hasn't. And why? Because we've got so many diplomatic ties. But many escaped and they fled around the world, and thousands of them survived and came to Detroit, Michigan. I'm here today because of an Armenian genocide. And they came with the clothes on their back, their memories and their culture. And you know why they came to Detroit, don't you? They came to Detroit because of Henry Ford's $5 workday. So they lived in areas where there was Ford Motor Company plants. And what they did was they recreated their lives. They built churches. They created coffee houses. They created venues where they could gather. They owned grocery stores and bakeries. And they survived and they thrived here in Detroit, Michigan. And so we all loved listening to records. I loved growing up listening to Armenian music. I didn't listen to rock and roll growing up. I'm just going to put that out there right now. So when I was in school and folks had said, you know, hey kids, did you hear Madonna's latest? I'm like, yeah, what's Madonna? I didn't know. But what I listened to really growing up was classical jazz. That's what was in my house. But also what was in the house were records, and it was Armenian music. And I loved listening to these records, and I loved dancing to Armenian music because, of course, you could tell by my athletic build, I'm made for dancing. A lot of you laughed. That wasn't. So I watched musicians on stage as I was growing up. Musicians that would play instruments like this, that would play, let's say, the violin or the clarinet that you see in this picture. And so it was my interest really at high school where I wanted to listen and enjoy more of Armenian music, but it really wasn't until college where I decided I wanted to start playing this type of music. So the instrument here is called the kanun. Again, it is a laptop harp, and it goes back all the way to the 5th century, if you can believe that. The instrument itself has 76 strings to it, and it rests on a bridge, and there's probably about 10,000 pounds of pressure. You'll see that there are these 4 chambers there on the bottom of the picture. The 10,000 pounds of pressure on this instrument, it's really considered the granddaddy of the piano, and it's played today throughout the Middle East. It's played in Armenia, it's played in Greece, and it's played quite a bit actually in this country. And I played for a number of years and really didn't know what I was going to necessarily do with this. But what had happened was in 2012, I got the Kresge Artist Fellowship, and that's a big deal for a musician like myself playing traditional Armenian music. It was validation that I was doing something right. It was validation that there are more than 3 or 4 people outside the family that actually like my music. So it changed my outlook on my music life. It opened my eyes. It showed me the importance of giving back, and it showed me the importance to preservation. And so what it also did was it allowed me the opportunity to go for some additional grants that would then allow me to say thank you to the musicians that created this music, the guardians of music. And so I created this film documentary to really pay homage to all of these musicians that played music here in Detroit, and it aired on Detroit Public Television this last year. And boy, I'll tell you, I'm a musician making a film that during the day runs a Chamber of Commerce. Shows you how easy that is. But what was great was I interviewed musicians and their families, and you know what you should know about this is that all these musicians were amateur musicians. None of these people, for the most part, were professional artists that went to school to learn Armenian music. That wasn't the case. These were folks that worked during the day. They'd come home, they'd wolf down dinner, they'd change their clothes, they'd take their instrument, and then they go off to the nightclub or whatever it was that they were to play. So they worked long hours, they worked hard, and they certainly played hard. And guess what? They didn't play for money. We do now. But we don't really all play for money. None of us are getting rich playing this kind of music, and that's not why we do it. We do it because of the love of the music that we have. And here's another interesting fact about this. We all learned by ear. None of us learned by sheet music. There is absolutely no sheet music for this stuff. And teachers would hum and whistle the songs, and it really just connected them to the past. They connected them to historic Armenia. They brought forth, can you picture this, that they brought forth the music from the old country to this country just by ear, and they wanted to preserve that. And so without knowing it, these musicians were all historians, and they played for the crowds. They would recognize someone from a certain village in the crowd. They'd know what their dance was and their song was, and then they would play for that. Detroit was a melting pot of culture. Music was heard throughout the city and people's homes and in surrounding buildings. And here, for example, is the Finlater. It's a Masonic temple. This is a recent picture. I took this picture last year. And you could see the Armenian writing still on the pillars. This is in Mexican now, but we called it, it was the old neighborhood of Del Rey. But Armenians owned this place for over 30, 35 years. When I talked to these musicians, it brought tears to their eyes as they remembered the past. They all told similar stories. They all had the same emotions, and what they had, which I have, is really a deep respect for this music. And so this is not classical or jazz music, it's folk music. And to the classical and jazz world, maybe this is not important to them because, again, it's village music. But to us, it definitely was important. And a lot of the mainstream did, as you could see in these pictures. I think it's really interesting that the middle slide talks about that a song that the Armenians played came in second to Elvis Presley's All Shook Up. Musicians were innovators, the way they played here in the United States. They performed with other ethnicities. And you could see when the musicians would play, the dancers would really cry. And you never knew why they were crying. Were they crying because they were happy to be in this country? Or were they crying because they remembered the past? And it's really the music that kept the community together. And so every song told a story. They were simple songs. They reflected village life. And to me, that's why it's really important. And I feel that it's my job as a musician to be able to talk about this, to talk about why this music is very important to my life. And it's important to me because of these two right here. So these two are my kids. That's Aline on the top left. You know, in 20 years she's going to flip out that I did this, but for now we can deal with this. And that's Alec on the bottom there, 6 and 4 years old. And I play this music because I want them to remember it. It's very important for me for them to remember it. This is history. This is my history. It's important for me that this music lasts for another 100 years. And that's why I'm here today. Thank you very much.